trauma is affecting our ability to be adults. As adults, we want to work, we want to play, we want to be with our families, but all those things are being affected in a negative way.
I'm really shocked by this, actually, Andres. 1 out of every 3 U.S. Americans, as of 2023 and beyond, are diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
1 in 3.
1 in 3.
Social media, the nonstop doom scrolling makes it even worse because there's bad news, but then you read about that bad news on a loop.
Yes.
So then it feels like the
Yes.
bad news is 10 times as worse, but
Yes.
you're really reading the same news item 10, 15, 20 times. When you turn on the news and you see another mass shooting at a school or workplace, even though it might have been thousands of miles away from you or just down the street, everybody is tuned into the fact that this could have happened right here, right now.
I know that for me, growing up as a Filipina female within an immigrant family, if I would say anything around this, I'm stressed, I need a pause, I need a reset, I would be told very vehemently, you're just weak.
Yeah, weak, exactly.
You're not working hard enough. Oh, and by the way, that's not relatable in our language or in our culture. So to me, it was this idea of, oh, okay, the stress isn't real. I just have to work harder.
Whatever trauma you're experiencing, a lot of this is cascading into your children.
They actually have mental health days, meaning if my boys need to take a mental health day, they just have to click on a little box. The teachers don't ask any questions. And by the way, it's not considered absent.
It's easier now for people to have normalized for themselves. I mean, right now, it's very easy for friends to say, oh yeah, when I was talking to my therapist, that just comes up.
It comes up. I
comes
totally
up.
agree with you.
I was talking to my therapist on Tuesday.
I totally agree with you.
Right? And there's no shame.
There's no
But when I
shame
compare,
or judgment.
And in fact, when it comes to the dating scene, there's now, they check on looks or they check on compatibility and interest, but they each of the partners is like, are you in therapy? And it's actually, they want to hear a yes.
They do want to hear a yes. And the reason...
Welcome to a new episode of Disrupt the Podcast with Andres Tapia
and Eloisa Domingo,
where we challenge conventional thinking and we look at the new ways that are shaping our future.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about the disruption of adulthood. And why we chose that, Andres, is because you and I have talked a lot, actually, in past episodes, but even as friends, we talk a lot about trauma that we, younger generations, and really we even as adults have been facing. You often talk about this era of shamelessness. Let's broaden this era of chaos and crisis that's around us. So let's just talk through that, because what are all of the things that are going on, right? Increase in gun violence, political strife, the leveling of, cities and war, across, global environments. And I also think that just the pro that media opens us up to knowing more, about other people across the globe. But additionally, though, then it's just this bombardment, of information. People often say that they have to take a hiatus from Facebook or from news because you're just getting so much information about all of the trauma that's going on, around the world.
And I think it's a combination, right, of the real trauma that is sort of escalated, right? And let's just go back even to COVID, that most of us were really traumatized by something that just came out of the left field. But it's not only the amount of disruption and trauma that's going on, but to your point, it's the social media, the nonstop doom scrolling that makes it even worse because, okay, there's bad news. But then you read about that bad news on a loop.
Yes.
So then it feels like the bad news is 10 times as worse, but you're really kind of reading the same news item 10, 15, 20 times, right?
Yep.
So I think that the combination of real change in a negative way, real disruption, and then the kind of the echoing of the same things on a repeat cycle and on a loop. It's kind of like we're in a bad news disruption loop that exacerbates what is really going on.
Yeah.
But all that takes hits on our neural systems,
right?
And our cortisol levels just keep getting hit and risen.
Well, and it's also cumulative. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, it's one thing to have one thing happen. It's quite another to have something else happen. And then you add, like you said, the doom scrolling. It's all of this cumulative stuff, is happening. And let's talk about kind of how that shows up. So Andres and I, looked up some of the stats that impacted us. I'm really shocked by this, actually, Andres. 1 out of every 3 U.S. Americans, as of 2023 and beyond, are diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
1 in 3.
1 in 3.
Okay.
A quarter of the U.S. population identify as having some sort of mental health issue or a breakdown. These unresolved cases of anxiety and depression in the workforce actually lead to $210 billion of lack of productivity, absenteeism, those kinds of things. So that's what's also interesting to me, is that it also shows up in the workplace.
Well, and that's the whole point, right? Like, it's like mental health, we see the symptoms of it. You read the statistics, and we see the impact on everything.
Yeah.
Obviously on the workforce, on productivity, on economics.
Yeah.
So why should managers and leaders really care?
Yeah.
Now, we want them to care because we want them to be leaders of character,
Right.
and we want them to be empathetic and care about the people.
Right.
But in addition, it's hurting their bottom line.
It is.
Right? So that's one area. The other is, as parents, and particularly for you, with you used to have 4 boys at home, is whatever trauma you're experiencing,
Yeah.
a lot of this is cascading into your children,
Yeah.
right? And and in a moment, we're going to talk about really how Gen Z has taken the brunt of it. So that's another area, right? So it doesn't affect just economics, but it affects ourselves and affects our family systems, and it stresses out communities.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an elected official in the city of Highland Park, and we were in the middle. 3 years ago, we had a mass shooting, and we've had to lead our city through the trauma of that, and we're still dealing with it. It's left a deep gash in our psyches.
Yeah.
So now we have these statistics.
Yep.
Not just being about one arena, but it's all encompassing flow
Yeah.
into almost every area of life is being affected by these, the fact that trauma is affecting our ability to be adults. As adults, we want to work, we want to play, we want to be with our families, but all those things are being affected in a negative way.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why you and I were really drawn to this. I know that you recently, actually, and I'm going to ask you about it. You recently you have a newsletter through LinkedIn, and you actually talked about. You particularly talked about PTSD, and I think that you talked about PTSD not necessarily as a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis, but kind of broadly, right? So
it's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor, right, for the cumulative impact of trauma, from COVID to all of the other things that you and I talked about. And let's wait on the Gen Z stuff, because it's the stuff that you have in here, Andres, is really applicable to a lot more than just the Gen Z population. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and by the way, with the Gen Z population, I did refer to them as the PTSD generation in a more metaphorical way, not in a clinical diagnosis way, as you pointed out. But they really took the brunt of it.
Yeah.
So I think let's combine the generalizable thing that is in the statistics that you brought, that this is affecting all of us.
Yep.
But I was particularly moved in a saddened and worrisome way that the statistics for Gen Z are even worse. So
Wow.
let's just do a comparison here, and I'm going to look at this table.
Yeah.
There was a study that looked at, where mental health was rated fair or poor, self-described, and while boomers answered 8% that the mental health was rated fair or poor, and Gen X at 13%, and millennials at 15%. But get this. Gen Z answering the question about they felt their mental health was fair or poor was 27%.
Practically doubled.
So there's one really important statistic. And then because of that, both because of the need and also the self-awareness, Gen Z also is more likely to have seen a therapist.
Yeah.
And think about it. We usually didn't think about, you usually think about seeing a therapist when you're older.
Yeah.
But here, look at this. Well, 22% of boomers have seen a therapist. Almost 40%, which is almost double, of Gen Z have. So these show that they have taken the brunt of these broader things that are affecting the workforce. And I want to turn to you, Eloisa, as a mom of 4 Gen Zers. How has this played out? I mean, we're in a room here that's now a studio that you shared was the classroom during COVID. And so, COVID happened in the most formative years for your 4 boys. Remind your viewers the ages of your boys as you answer this.
Yep.
And then how has this played out for them?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So just for our viewers, Gen Z typically is seen as the generation of kiddos that were born between 1997 and 2014, and my kids were born in those years. I have two sets of twin boys that are 17 that are in their senior year in high school, and then I currently have 12-year-old boys who are in their seventh grade year. When we went through COVID in 2020, the younger twins were in second grade, and then the other kids, my elder boys, were in seventh grade. So like you said, really, really formative years, very formative years. I think all of the years are formative, but that was actually also really interesting. The other thing too, by the way, is that we also just moved here from Baltimore. So they're going in and they're meeting their new friends, and they had 1 year with their friends because we moved here in 2019, and then everything shut down in March of 2020. And so, as you mentioned, our beautiful studio is actually their former classroom, where they had two of them were here, and one was over there, and one was here with their laptops, and they were learning. I think that they had been exposed to digital learning and to interact with a laptop or an iPad in a really positive way. So 3 of them did very, very well. They actually liked it. Interestingly, they were very independent learners. They went through it. Here's the thing. Let me just note this. We also have a biased situation because they were born with friends. They had friends in the womb. They kind of, they grew up around each other. So they have 4 friends, around them. But I did have one. My youngest actually had a lot of issues with anxiety, with depression. He is my most extroverted son. He also lives and breathes and thrives in an environment where he can have social cues. Without that, in the digital era, he couldn't pick that up. As a result of that, his learning went down. And actually what we ended up doing is, I'll be honest with you, just kind of forfeiting second grade. He showed up and he did his stuff, but he was allowed to do like a fourth of his homework, log off. And he subsequently lost a lot of learning and went back. So he was in second grade. He went back to kindergarten level reading. Wow. There was just a lot. And even now, him being a 7th grader, we still have the cumulative effects of those kinds of things and have to be very critical. I just booked a tutor. Lots and lots of great tutors do things digitally. We absolutely will not put a tutor in front of him that's on a screen. We just won't. So that's the learning aspect. But additionally, all 4 of my kids have gone through therapy. I didn't see a therapist until I was 22, years old. And so that stat that you mentioned is very true. And one thing that's also, I think, really interesting, Andres, as you were saying this, 2 things. Number one, there are actually more in-school therapists and social workers now in school than before, where it's actually you hire and you have somebody come in. It's not just, you have a therapist and you're going to see them outside of school. The therapists are now inside of the schools because of this. Social workers are now inside of the school, because of this. And then also my kids, the district that we're in, 2 districts that we're in are great. They actually have mental health days, meaning if my boys need to take a mental health day, they actually don't have to say it's a mental health day. They just say they just have to click on a little box. The teachers don't ask any questions. And by the way, it's not considered absent. It's just free days. It's like, you know what?
How many do they
Take
get?
a moment. They have 10 days, the entire year. So they don't have to say anything. My kids have taken advantage of it. It's not a lot, but it's like, I'm just going to take the morning, Mom.
Yeah.
Well,
and actually in listening to young people, every generation has their own lingo and the way of talking.
Yeah.
But for Gen Z, there's therapy and trauma-related vocabulary has entered just the everyday vernacular. So here's some examples. That's really stressy. I need to regulate. I'm spiraling. I need a reset, right? That's not in my window of tolerance today. I mean, think about, I would never imagine talking like that, but this is just part of it. And also I'll unpack that in therapy when they're sort of in a situation that might be a little bit too difficult, or my mom guilt tripped me again, or that was a trauma response.
Yeah.
And so think about how, for young people, preteens, teens, and early 20-somethings, how just, words that used to be like cool and hip, and now it's like that's stressy, and I'll unpack that in therapy as part of day-to-day rhesus language.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think is really interesting? Again, this is coming from a mom's perspective additionally. It's two things. Number one, I actually like that because there's an elevation of consciousness around this. Like, it's just not something that's happening. It's like, oh, that's a stress response for me. Or like, what's happening here is because I'm stressed. Or, for you to be able to say that consciously and to name it. That's number one. But that also additionally, number two, for me, I like that that it's in their vernacular. I mean, it is something. Now, I don't want it to be flippant. Oh, that's stressy. I mean, that happens with vernacular. But I mean, I know that for me, growing up as a Filipina female within an immigrant family, and you're also from an immigrant family, and hardworking family at that. Both of my parents are physicians. When if I would say anything around this, I'm stressed, they say stressy, I need a pause, I need a reset, I would be told very vehemently, you're just weak.
Yeah, weak, exactly.
You're not working hard enough. Oh, and by the way, that's also not, that's not relatable in our language or in our culture. So to me, it was this idea of, okay. So it's what I'm feeling is not real. The stress isn't real. I just have to work harder.
Yeah. But I think what we're learning from our young people is that there's no shame in saying, hey, I'm going to therapy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The vernacular here,
Yeah.
The fact that it's just part of everyday language,
Yeah.
they've normalized
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually, on the one hand, kind of sad that we've normalized it.
It is.
But on the other hand, given that the realities,
Yep.
Therapy is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And coming back to adults again,
Yep.
I think that it's easier now for people to have normalized for themselves. I mean, right now, it's very easy for friends to say, "Oh, yeah." So when I was talking to my therapist, that just comes up.
It comes up. I
comes
totally
up.
agree with you.
I was talking to my therapist on
I
Tuesday.
totally agree with you.
Right, and we
Yeah.
go, "Oh, well, I see my therapist on a Thursday," and
Totally agree with you.
and it's just part of, and there's no shame.
There's no
But when I
shame,
compare
or judgment.
before, so that's part of it as well. And in fact, when it comes to the dating scene, there's now, they check on looks or they check on compatibility and interest, but they kind of, each of the partners is like, are you in therapy? And it's actually, they want to hear a yes.
They do want to hear a yes. And the
because
reason
we're so stressed out that if you're not in therapy, I don't know if you're like in the right lane.
Wow, that came out of nowhere. But this is actually really interesting because, Andres, we didn't prep this, by the way, and I like where you're going. So, I, as a single person, as I'm meeting people, it's so interesting. You've actually elevated something I really didn't think about. But when that has come up in conversations, I'm meeting with, oh, no, I'm good on Wednesdays, but I can't do a Wednesday evening because I'm going to go see my therapist. I'll be honest with you. That's check. Good. And
how often do you go?
And good
weekly?
for you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, so equals, okay, so you have a level of consciousness. You are owning your mental health, you're not nervous about it, and for you to just bring it up, it's not a badge of honor. There's no shame, right? It's part of, and honestly,
and
you're
also
owning. That's it. You're owning and working on yourself. So to me, it really is like, okay, because I'm not picking up on anyone else's. I've got my own stuff, going on. I see my therapist once a week, sometimes twice a week. I'm not doing it for someone else.
Well, I actually went to a singles mixer, and it was organized by someone who is a therapist. So a lot of her patients or clients, a lot of her clients, were there, but other people. But I swear, you just made the circle, and you could just hear exactly what you're talking about in a singles mixer.
So amazing.
And I could just see people sort of checking the box. And okay, good.
Yeah. So what you're saying here, which is, I love that actually, Andres, is what we talked about earlier in the workforce, is that it is, because it's more conscious, because there is this connection of like, this is typical, this is okay. We need to then provide the resources in the workforce, increased PTO days, increase what I have seen is the two things that I love the most is increase in mental health days, which by the way, don't require an absenteeism. It's just
have like in the school, like
exactly. From my last employer, we had 5 mental health days that you can just go into Workday or whatever system that you have, and you just click the box. And by the way, it's not it's not a PTO day. It's just you just take it off, which I think is amazing. And then the second thing, I have seen a rise in mental health employee resource groups. So people call ERGs, some people call them BRGs, business resource groups. groups. In the past, many of the typical ERGs around this topic actually came from a medical diagnosis or a place that was less than the norm. Disability ERG, access ERG. And instead, what I'm actually seeing is mental health ERG or wellness, ERG.
And what do these groups do?
Yeah, so two things that I've seen. Number one, when they come together, they actually provide space. Actually, now that I'm thinking, they provide space for one another to talk about wellness, to talk about how you're taking time for each other. So that's this network where you can just be and you can practice wellness. The second thing, though, is also working with the organization to create policies and practices that support mental health in the workplace. Increase of PTO, increase of the mental health days. One of the things at my last employer, and actually it was at the executive level, we would invite the ERG in for the first 5 or 10 minutes of our meetings, and they would do a wellness moment. So
what
everybody
did that look
would,
like?
we would have to close our eyes, for example. They would lead us through an exercise, and everybody would just say, silence your cell phones. If you want to go off the video, everybody close your eyes and just, take a moment. They would turn on music. And so a lot of it was just this idea of centering and meditation. And we would open a lot of our executive level meetings actually like that. So the ERGs
Executive
would
level
invent.
meetings.
Yeah.
And how did
Yeah.
executives react?
Admittedly, some of them were like, "This is kind of hokey," and I wouldn't put it past many of us, including myself, to go off the camera and kind of use it to whatever, and then come back and be like, "Wow, that was amazing," But what it did though is that it created a standard of this is significant, to us. We do have some expertise in our ERGs, and we're working with one another, to acknowledge that this is real, just like you said, and that this is impacting productivity and
and speaking
support and engagement.
Yeah, speaking of productivity, I want to talk a little bit about the role of the manager. In this, because managers are really beside themselves with how needy, and to use their language, they feel their team members are.
Wow.
They oh my gosh, I lost them to a mental health day when I really need them here at the office. Or they're telling me that they're stressed out and that they're really having a hard time focusing today. Or I feel like this is them saying things like, I feel that they need more hand-holding than I have time to do.
Okay.
And so, and I hear a lot of judgment in here.
Yeah.
So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the role of the manager here, because I'm sympathetic to the manager sort of has the worst of multiple worlds, right? They have to respond to the directors or the executives.
Right.
And they got to respond to all the clamor
That's
of
right.
the team members
That's
there.
right.
And they're the ones held accountable for keeping the lights on.
Right.
And making sure the product and services are going out the door, right?
Right.
So that's a lot to handle.
It
now
is.
You're putting this whole load about depression and mental health days on them.
Yep.
And then what is a manager to do?
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would like that. Yeah, well, it's interesting because we don't call them middle management for nothing. I agree with you.
They're sandwiched, right?
There's that exactly. They're sandwiched. Yeah. No, but one thing that when you said that, I don't. Full transparency, I haven't really looked this up, but when we talk about management, when you're referring to management here, is that a different generation than who they're managing?
Well, yeah, there tends to be a little bit of an age difference.
Okay.
Sometimes not much, but we can assume that managers have been in the workforce longer.
Yeah.
And so they tend to have sort of more traditional views, right? About buck up,
Yes.
I'm not your nanny, or
Right.
I'm not your therapist, I'm here to make sure that you're doing your work, and now you're asking for more attention. You're asking for what? Empathy?
Yeah.
But I think, no, not more think, I believe the managers are going to have to shift from being judgmental to truly being empathetic.
Yeah.
Not only because it's a very humane thing to do that this stressed out generation and workforce needs, but because it's going to end up with more productivity.
Right.
And managers
Right.
are held accountable for productivity. I want to encourage managers to truly see this as a productivity move. That for them
That's
to take
great.
that 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting,
Yep.
for them to allow and not judge people who take a mental health day,
Yeah.
for those to spend an extra 5, 8, 9 minutes to really listen to whatever is burdening the employee, that in the end, they're going to get a return. And this is economic terms, a return on that investment.
Yeah. And that's, so I love what you just said, because essentially what you're saying, Andres, and correct me if I'm wrong, we want the outcome to be the same. We want our workforce to be engaged and productive and present and, giving of themselves and authentic. But because we are handling a completely new, trauma-informed, trauma-impacted level of adults that are now coming into the workforce, we need to do something differently, which is really, what we call equity, this idea of some people need just something different to get to the same outcome. Absolutely. That's really what equity is about. And I love, you're talking about two particular things, is this, you said judgment, so don't judge. I do think it's very easy to judge. Full transparency, I do think, even for me, as you were talking about that, because of the way that I was raised, because I'm in Gen X, I definitely think come on. I'm not going to sit here and, baby you. But you're right in that, taking into account that this is real, the trauma that they grew up with, and what we started with is this idea of formative years. When we talked about it for my kids, I talk about formative years in terms of first grade to about high schoolish. But we're talking, broadly.
Well, right. I mean, and until you're into your 20s, all that is formative.
That's right.
About who you're going to be as an adult for the rest of your life.
That's right.
And I have some thoughts here based on the research I've done and with the team on character-based leadership. And, as we've talked previously, there's 7 traits that we talked about, but I think there's 3 that I think are very relevant here, and I'd like to share them with our listeners and with you. I think that, when the manager says, what can I do? We say, be more empathetic. But what does empathy look like? I would argue make the case for 3 character demonstrations. One is kindness. And I refer to that as like water in the desert. When life has been really hard, when you turn on the news and you see another mass shooting at a school or workplace, even though it might have been thousands of miles away from you or just down the street, everybody is tuned into the fact that this could have happened right here, right now. So kindness becomes a restorative thing, because people are brittle and people are anxious. And when you just do an act of kindness, and acts of kindness, there's 1,000 acts of kindness. But at the end, kindness is simply about pausing, listening, and then responding in a way that says, I heard you. I understand that's difficult. Is there anything I can do to help in this situation? In the end, that's a very kind thing to do.
It is.
Kindness also, I would argue, and actually we had Nicole Yelsey from KindWorks AI.
I was just thinking about her,
And there was a whole discussion we had, but it's worth bringing back here, that kindness doesn't mean niceness.
Right, correct.
Kindness means being able to speak clearly and truthfully about the situation. And so a good way for managers to kind of get their head around this is take the moment to listen. But it doesn't mean that you abdicate your responsibility to hold people accountable for the work that needs to be done. And the kindness is, I listened, I heard you, I feel what you're feeling, and at the same time, let us problem solve how you can get back on track and get things done, and that might mean working harder, working a little later, whatever case may be. But if you've spent the time of empathy and connection, then you can then put on the table the problem solving needs to happen. So it's not like an abdication of, I'm not, you're asking me to be kind and therefore let people get away with whatever they want to get away with? I said, no, that's not the case. So that's one thing.
I love that.
I have a couple others, but I want to see if you had any thoughts on that.
No, thank you. I really like the fact that you brought in this concept of kindness, not niceness, because I think some of our listeners may think, well, but I do that. I am nice. I'm a good manager. I am nice. But to your point, this concept of kindness is us asking you all as leaders, us asking our leadership to go a little bit deeper. It does take a little bit more time. All of this that we're talking about isn't it's all going to fix itself. So implementing this character trait of kindness is going to be a little bit more, but like you said, your return on investment is actually greater.
Exactly, yeah. So let me offer another one. That's humility. And I would call that letting go. Too many managers kind of have a default, look, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I know how to do this, right? Don't tell me how to manage my people. Or when the people they're managing come up with different ideas that have to do with, hey, let's open up with a meditative time or a mindfulness time. But humility is really about letting go of the things that actually did work for us. But to acknowledge that perhaps I don't know what my team needs, but my team knows what it needs. And humility then is about letting go of what I have presuppose they need, and to listen and to be open to maybe doing things differently. So I think that humility is also another way. Again, we're trying to give managers a sort of a turn of the dial about how can I take a little bit of different stance. And humility can be as simple as that. Just stop, don't default to what it's always been. And listen to an alternative way and then try it on for size.
I mean, to me, it's that concept of, what I'm hearing you say is what we just said earlier about equity. Just because it worked for you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for other people, So,
Yeah. And then the third one I would say is gratitude. And I would say, watch how much comes back to you. Instead of complaining about what is referred to often the neediness or the specialness of the workforce, and given all that was said, is to actually turn around and say, what is it about this workforce and even the younger generation that I'm grateful for? What is it that they bring to the workplace, to me, to the team, that is fresh because of the new perspective? Or that is, even if they're older workers, but because they are able to call out the stress and the trauma, that actually it's made me a better manager, right? Because I'm listening more, I'm allowing more inclusive behaviors for others to express what they're feeling. And in that moment of gratitude, we actually have a different perspective. Instead of seeing that as a deficit-based model, like, look at all the ways I'm going to complain about how they are, to say, look at all the wonderful ways that my team shows up here and supports one another. And that becomes a virtuous cycle that can actually not only lead to a greater release of oxytocin, which is that bonding neurotransmitter that elevates mood, but lo and behold, greater amount of oxytocin released in the workforce is proven to be the generator of greater productivity.
Absolutely. So we've reached the time in our podcast episode, Andres, is where we kind of tell our viewers what we took away from this, what we call Disrupt GPS. And we share, kind of one or two takeaways from the conversation. For me, my Disrupt GPS is that, we said that we were talking about disrupting adulthood. Even me sitting here and listening to our own conversation, I realized that my adulthood was actually really disrupted. My being a mom was actually disrupted because of the amount of cumulative trauma and rapid fire trauma that we're living inside of the world, today. I think that even for me, because I tend to be a very solutions oriented person, I really do think like, I can get through it and I can figure out and I can, kind of work through it. But for me, certainly just the acknowledgement that trauma really does have a lot of impact on adulthood. That is a real takeaway for me. And then the other thing too is, as you and I talked about this for managers, but again, even for moms, the defaulting is very easy because in management and managing a family, you're really trying to get a lot done. You're trying to move forward. You're trying to keep everything moving forward. But one of the things that I love about what you and I talked about is the concept of go slower to go faster. Sometimes right now, because you're handling kind of a trauma impacted workforce, a trauma impacted family, sometimes you do have to go slower to go faster.
Yeah. Well, a couple of my takeaways, I always love hearing about how you, as a very powerful and effective business strategist and leader, how seamless you move into talking about raising these 4 boys and 5 dogs, and how that is a equally deeply important thing that you bring your best to that, right? And then you go right back from that to say, well, and what I learn with my kids, I also is helpful for the workforce and vice versa. So I was really struck with that, and I think from this conversation for our listeners, and is that trauma has seeped into every part of life.
It really has.
And we've tried to provide some insights into how we can better manage the trauma within ourselves, but also around the people around us, whether they're family members or coworkers. So that's the takeaway there, almost a seamlessness of that issue. The other is, as much as we put energy on, calling out managers on their judgmentalism and encouraging them to be more empathetic and give them some tips, I kind of want to turn it around a little bit. And I think we need to be more empathetic toward managers. Because they are in the toughest spot this is a heavy burden, right? And but I think that for managers, the opportunity is let the younger generation and let the and the workers that are in this more vulnerable state be your teachers. And the more you give to them, the more you're going to get back.
Yeah.
Because
I love that.
It will really stand out that in this moment of brittleness and hardness and polarization, a manager that listens and leans in and gives understanding and gives direction in that context, that's going to come back.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really amazing. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this great conversation about the disruption of adulthood. You can continue. We ask you, actually, let us know what you thought. Talk to us, ask us questions, comment. You can find Andres with all of the links in the description that we have here. You can find myself. You can also find the Disrupt podcast. We want to thank you for your kindness, for your humility, and for your gratitude that you brought to this conversation. We hope that we gave you the same.
Yeah. See you in the next episode.
Thanks so much.
Ciao.